Now that we've covered the loft tools and the sweep rail tools, do want to quickly cover the patch tools. Okay, now patch isn't necessarily creating complex geometry surfaces. It's actually just kind of capping them. So in other words, we take a look here. We have two surfaces, two closed curves. We'll go ahead and loft them. Okay, and this works whether you created the form using loft or using the rails. Okay, but the idea is that we've created a surface, okay, that has a base and a top. But what happens at the top here? Okay, how do we actually close this off? So what I'm going to do is, I've created a loft. I'm actually going to rebuild this with 10 points, just so that, to make the situation a little bit more complicated, just so we make sure that we don't make any mistakes. And we have a better understanding when creating the patch. So let's go ahead and hit OK. All right. So here we have the actual surface. And then we have the original line work. Okay. So when we use the patch command, okay, we'll type in patch. It's going to ask to select the curves. And this is where it's really important that you make sure to select the curve of the actual lofted surface, not of the line work that you used to originally create the surface. Okay, so in other words, we're going to click on the edge of the surface. Now that seems easy and clear here, but in most other parts of the surface, it's pretty difficult to see which is which, right? So when I'm using the patch, I do want to just kind of go to the zoom in on the easiest point to really be able to make sure that I select the surface. Okay. If it's too close, then just make sure that you select surface edge. All right. So we'll go ahead and click surface edge and we'll hit enter. Okay. Now we have a bunch of different options here. The one that we really care about the most is going to be stiffness. Okay. So I'm going to bring this down to 1 and then I'll select preview. So this has a level 1 for stiffness and it essentially it tries to, smooth out or finish off the geometry that we've created from this bottom surface. Okay. However, we could adjust the stiffness. So let's go to say 50 and preview that. And you see that it gets tighter and tighter. It gets smaller and smaller, right? So if we go to 100, we click on preview. Okay. So you'll notice that it's no longer as kind of fluid. So this might be something that you're interested in and might, something much stiffer, which is what you want. However, the downside to a stiffness is that it doesn't give you a clean geometry anymore, right? So right here, for example, okay? Now some of this stuff can be edited, once we offset some of the surfaces, we could expand, we could change this, if we're going to add this into a drawing, it's okay. We could just cut a section through it and make the adjustments in, say, a line drawing or, when we do the make 2D. Um, so sometimes little gaps like this aren't that big of a deal um, because it's the idea that we're looking for. And at this scale, like if we were to render something this far back, no one's ever going to notice that difference, right? But it is something to know that that is a possibility. So if we go to 1, we go to preview, right? And we can leave it as something like that. Okay. There is another option that we can do, and that's without any curvature at all. We could always just use the cap command. We could select this, type in cap, and it's going to cap it. Now notice the other thing is that when we cap it, it's now turned this into a poly surface, which means that we could use the union or Boolean difference commands, all of the Boolean commands we could use on a poly surface. Whereas when it's open, or even when it's open with the patch, right, this is still open from below, so we cannot use any of the Boolean union or any of the Boolean commands with an open um, form like this. Okay, so just understand that if you want a top piece here, you could use the patch command. If you just want it flat, you could use the cap command. Okay, and that's it. That was all I wanted to kind of cover just to wrap up the loft and the sweep commands.